Welcome one, welcome all to the Rift Rewind, our ESPN Esports Weekly League of Legends program. Every Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Arda, Emily, Tyler, and Jacob with you. And actually, we're going to begin the show with a little bit of an announcement. The Rift Rewind, as you know it, until the end of Worlds, going to take a little bit of a break. But what we're going to do is we're not going to stop our programming there, of course. We're going to have a whole ton of things to look forward to along the way. And the first stop will be this Friday. And let me tell you something. It's going to be a barn burner. This is going to be a ridiculous several hours. In fact, when I say several hours, I mean as long as it takes, folks. As long as it takes. If you've ever wanted to be in the room on how the top 20 players going into Worlds is created and thought of and debated and fought about and argued over, well, now is your chance. On Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, that is September the 11th at 3 p.m. Eastern, the four of us will duke it out until we have a definitive top 20 list of players going into Worlds. Tyler, this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, as a proud member of the Church of Chovy, I look forward to these Friday establishment that we are setting up. There's 100 players on the list that we're going to have to cull down to the top 20, but intelligent people like myself, like LS, high intellectual analysts in the League of Legends scene that have been here for so long, we know the true number one player going to Worlds this year, and There's a lot of great players, Arda, Emily, Jacob, the chat. You have your showmakers and your knights, and you can talk about your caps and all his trophies in Europe and being maybe. But there's only one true god going to the League of Legends World Championship. There might be two, but for the Church of Chovy, there's only one true lord that we have to see, guide his light towards as he goes to Shanghai.
This is probably the best mid laner class in World's history. Certainly one of them, in my opinion. Like you have Knight. I said this the other day, and you said it. You said some of it too, Tyler. Like think about it. You have Knight, Chovy, even like your more fringe players outside of your like champions, right? Bjergsen and Caps, obviously, as the people who qualified out of their reason. But also, yeah, you have Showmaker. You have Power of Evil. Like, some people don't Larson. Like giving Jensen credit, but you have Jensen and you have Larson, right? Like, there's, like, this list is actually very stacked in terms of mid laners. I'm excited for that because I like seeing good mid laners play each other, because especially with some of the champions that exist in meta right now, because you play fairly aggressive in lane. But, yeah, this is one of the best mid laner classes in world history, in my opinion, and I'm excited to watch it.
The fact that Shie was not mentioned already tells me that I am in for a fight here.
Oh yeah, have fun. Have fun. Mr. Bjergsen's coming for GA on Friday. Like, Mr. Bjergsen, it's going to
How's your poll going, Tyler?
Right.
How's your poll of how many NA players will get in there?
GA versus Bjergsen is going to be a topic of discussion this coming Friday, so...
I mean, I voted one in that poll. I voted one in your poll.
Apparently it is.
And I voted one in your poll, and I can promise you it's not Bjergsen who I'm championing for as the one NA player that deserves top 20. So there you go.
So this is the kind of conversation you can look forward to on Friday. And by the way that it's going to work is that all of us, somehow, some way, as long as it takes, we all have to agree on the final 20 list. And if this last 2 minutes on this show was any indication, it's going to take a while.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
so
so many great mid laners. So many great mid laners. And
well, let's save it for Friday. Let's save it for Friday. We got a lot to talk about.
There's one more spot left, though. There's one more spot left, though. Faker or BDD, who's going to be?
Exactly. So that's going to be on Friday. at 3 p.m. Eastern, like I said. And by the way, loyalties are for sale. So if you want to bribe us on certain names you want us to bring to the table, you can certainly make your pitch on Twitter. Follow
My
us on
loyalty is
Twitter.
not for sale.
Yeah,
Mine
yeah.
definitely is.
I've already
100% is for
tried.
sale. 100% for sale. So you can definitely bribe me into bringing, if you want me to bring up Spica and debate him in the top 10, I gladly will for the right price. Anyway, on that note, let's talk about, like Tyler said, the remaining spot at Worlds will come down to T1 and Gen.G. As we move on to the LCK, T1 looked great today, defeating Afrika Freaks, moving on to the next round. Faker looked good in pretty much all those games. There was one game where it looked like T1 threw Emily, but at the end of the day, T1 looked very strong as they go into that last matchup against Gen.G.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad Faker could come out and have a good showing because I feel like a lot of people were either disappointed in his performance or more so disappointed in the way that T1 was kind of drafting around Faker, which I even wrote about this. There's a lot behind what they expect Faker to do, and I think you actually really saw it in that game one when he was on the Galio. Like, he had so many amazing taunts and he was just controlling team fights for T1 so that Gumayushi, their new like 80 carry prodigy, could come up and just kind of fire from the back line. It worked really, really well. I like when I like don't disagree with how T1 has been drafting around their rookies, first closer and now Gumayushi, because they're giving them carries that are A, just generally strong in the meta, but B, that they don't have to necessarily do as much work on, that you can rely on a really strong veteran like Faker who can take over entire team fights on a champion like Galio. So I thought it was a pretty good look for T1. They looked shakier in game two, let's just say. I think it's going to be a pretty interesting fight against Gen.G, who are a team that I actually maybe think should have been in the finals if it hadn't been for that weird patch thing and Chovy kind of like going Herculean and like dragging DRX to the finals. Yeah.
Wait, is that world number one Chovy, Tyler? Is that who you were talking about?
I mean, he's going to be up there. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be a fight this Friday. But yeah, I watched all the matches this morning live, and the things that stood out to me, a few things that stood out to me were obviously Gumayushi had a really solid debut. I think people who, just watched highlights or just kind of skim through are going to be like, oh my god, he's a god, he carried the series. And he played really well in the laning phase. A bit hit and miss when it came to, actually playing in these team fights. And some of it wasn't his fault, especially in game 2 on Draven, where he had about 700 adoration stacks. And Alim, a fellow rookie, stole a kill from him right in front of him when he could have cashed in on 700 adoration stacks, and kind of he KS'd him. And as a good Draven player does, Gumayushi, in his heated rage, heated tilts, he just kind of ran it down mid after losing that adoration stack. And his laning phase is excellent. You could say there's a reason why I've been told throughout the year he is the golden rookie of T1. If Closer is more of a 1B and Gumayushi is a 1A, like they're two can't miss prospects, two prospects that they do not want to trade away or give to other teams, especially in China. But they were a lot better skirmishing wise. They got early leads in every single game. Lim looked really good with his early pressure, especially on Leah. My issue with this team and why I'm scared of them going against Gen.G is that their mid-game to late-game team fighting had a lot left to be desired. Faker looked great. Faker was the shining light of the team alongside Kana when it came to those team fights, but there was a lot, especially in Game 2 and Game 3. Game 3, where they were up 10k gold at 20 minutes. It took them about another 10 minutes to close the door. Obviously, you don't want to rush it. You don't want to just throw away the series. You want to take it slow, get those Drakes, get the the Ocean Soul, make sure you have a 100% win chance instead of risking it even if it's 95 to 5%. But their team fighting outside of game 1, where I think Gumayushi was on the Caitlyn and he looked very comfortable on that champion in the team fighting setup. His Jhin also was quite good. I'm just worried about how this team goes against a much better Gen.G team. I think for T1, and I've said this on Twitter, I've said this countless times, Faker is the soul, the glue of the team, but the ace of the team right now, the best player on this team is Kana. And for T1 to win tonight and to make Worlds, there's a lot going to be on Kana's shoulders, because the one advantage I do see for T1 versus Gen.G is I do think Kana is a better player than Rascal. And if Kana can get those leads like he did a lot yesterday against, Fly in the first game where Fly and Keen role swapped, Kana slapped around Fly in the top lane on Ornn. If Kana can get those leads and they can prioritize Kana and get him ahead, he's a player that has shown he can carry this team. And I feel like I'm good with Faker. Faker will be there. Put him on the galley, put him on the TF, let him affect the side lanes. But getting Kana ahead is my number one thing tonight. If they can get him ahead in front of Rascal and let Kana carry, I think they can make Worlds. But it's going to be so much more of a test tonight, because no offense to Afrika, they are a very solid team. They're a very tricky team. They practice more than any other team in the world. I love Uv, makes these guys spirit in them. They practice, they put their nose to the grindstone, and they practice hours upon hours. But Gen.G's a different beast. Gen.G should have made Worlds already if it wasn't for Chovy. And for T1 to beat Gen.G, the super, talented team where they spent so much money in the offseason, even taking Clid from T1, it's going to take Kana and Faker and this entire team to have a much better series than they had against Afrika. What they showed last night, or, this previous morning, is not going to be enough to beat Gen.G.
I just want to say, back to Emily's point about drafting, I don't necessarily disagree with the way that they draft for their rookies and giving them priority picks that allow them to, I don't want to say contribute less, but not have to play in the same style that they have to put everything on their backs all the time, right? But I do disagree with a lot of the way that T1 is drafted this season. I think that they've had a real issue with draft the entire season. I think that Gen.G has had some similar issues at some times, but I also think Gen.G is, just to Tyler's point, a really strong team, a well-rounded team. But I am really worried, even if this T1 team makes it to the World Championships, they beat Gen.G this evening. I think that going into the World Championship, they're going to face some of the best coaching staffs in the world, and drafting better get figured out for them. Because for me right now, all season I've been a little disappointed by their general draft. Not going against what you said, Emily, but more so just widely, and I've had a little bit of that issue with them.
We're in disagreement. I actually think it's going to be a really big. So I'm picking Gen.G first of all, but then second of all, and I don't think it's going to be oh my gosh, Gen.G are going to roll them, but I do think Gen.G are going to win. And Tyler brought it up, but I'm also going to say this in the context of, if they do manage to beat Gen.G, this is going to have to be something that this team really, really addresses in boot camp, especially if they are going to be running closer, if they are going to be running Kumayushi, or if they are going to be swapping at all with this roster. It's that their team fighting has to be a lot tighter, because for as many mistakes, and I know you can go and you can point to Top Esports and their terrible drafts and the fact that 369 grouped with the team and team fought on Fiora when you should have split push, and you can rip apart JDG for not having as good players as you think they have, and somehow they keep winning or whatever. You know how they win? They know how to draft for their team, and they team fight really, really well. All of these top Chinese teams, you have Damwon, these are all teams that are going to be able to beat T1 in this regard, and T1 used to be the team fighting team, right? That's how they would pull off these miraculous, they would lose slowly and then pull off these miraculous mid to late team fights. And this is something the team did since about 2015 and the merger, right? So when they merged the two sister teams together. So it's weird not to see that be a staple of T1 and something that they're a little bit less comfortable with. It makes sense given their roster swaps that they've made. So I'm not even denigrating the team for it. I'm just saying this is something that they absolutely will have to fix if they want to beat Gen.G, and then also if they want to do well at Worlds.
Here's an interesting topic on the note of Worlds. Say this T1 team does make it to the World Championship. They do beat Gen.G tonight, which I think most of us would favor Gen.G in that matchup. But if T1 wins, I am curious what Riot's restrictions around substitutes will be, particularly given the fact that there's such a concern around COVID and how many people you can bring into the country. It is 7. You know that for
Yeah, it's
certain.
still 7.
It's 7. I mean, we had our first world teams leave today with Europe, with G2, Rogue, and Fnatic all going. And I've been told by
So you have to
teams,
take Closer and Kumiyashi, right? Like that there's nobody else there.
No, I think Lim is Lim scares me. Like, he had some really good early games, but I don't know if I trust him. And I know there's the Cuz Lightyear jokes. He plays a very boring, patient style, but sometimes you need that at Worlds, and we've seen this a lot. And I think T1 has shown that if you're gonna bring subs, you need to bring two junglers. You want a fast tempo, high aggressive rookie jungler in a Lim, but I also think Cuz you have to have a backup plan. I think, man, that's so tough.
I mean, I think it's fair to say Teddy is more of a liability than Faker.
Oh man, that's so. I mean, it's also the flip side of Gumayashi and Teddy is where Teddy's a better team fighter. Like we saw yesterday when it came down to like late game positioning, Gumayashi wasn't king. Like he had some really bad misplays with Draven where even though I give him, a few, brushaways with like a Lim did steal his adoration stack kill, but there were some plays where he was stepping way too forward on Draven, and Teddy's a better late game team fighter. Gumiyashi's a better laner, but it's really
well, if
hard.
you could take both though, right? Or if you had to choose between taking Gumiyashi or Closer, and you have to put your trust into Teddy or Faker in that situation.
Yeah.
You choose Faker every single time.
Yeah, I would
you take Gumiyashi with you. Yes.
You leave Closer. You sit down Closer and say like,
Yeah,
sorry.
if you're subbing
Yeah.
a jungler, yeah.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is the build up to this has been, and this is why I'm actually super curious to see if they do make Worlds who they take, because the build up to this has been Closer's our guy. Like he is the guy that we're looking at grooming for when Faker retires, right? So, and I'm not like, that's not a hint that Faker's retiring anytime soon. I'm just saying like that's the actions of subbing him in and the team compositions that they've tried to draft around him and the champions they have given him points to the fact that they really want this guy to succeed for them specifically. They could be to sell him, but it sounds like no, they want to keep him and farm him from their own trainee system so he can eventually start for them if that becomes necessary. But yeah, I would still bet on Faker every single time.
I mean, the thing I think about T1 is I can see a world where T1 loses Knight, and I can see Gumayashi, and I can see Teddy, and I can see a Lim, and I can see Cousin. I don't see a world where T1 ends the season and Faker isn't the one dying on a sword. I feel like they're gonna give Faker the chance to. If T1's going out at Worlds, if they're going out at the regional finals versus Gen.G, I don't see a world where Faker isn't the one dying in that last game. I feel like they're always going to give him the chance to have the last.
Dude's gonna play till he doesn't want to anymore.
Yeah, you
Right,
know,
should.
he
He's
can like
earned it.
1v9.
Didn't you say, Emily, like you said this a couple programs ago, where you still believe Faker's the better player?
Yes.
Yes. Oh,
Right.
by
That
a
sort of solves
significant
the
margin,
Yeah.
right. So that
actually.
solves
Yeah.
that solves that
And
debate, right?
that's not like slamming on Closer. It's just that he's a rookie. He doesn't have the
Sure.
experience that Faker does. He doesn't have the game knowledge and intelligence that Faker does.
I think obviously Faker's a better player from a skill perspective. I just think, like I made this point previously, like that, so as much as he's played consistently for a long time without break, like that wears on people, right? And like sometimes I do think he just needs to sit for a little bit and just sit a series out. Obviously not right now, because all the stakes are on the line this evening. But I think generally like it's good for his health if he like sits out a little bit, and I think that's what we saw earlier in the season when Closer was playing, right? Like. But Faker is the better player, and I mean he is a perfectionist in the literal sense of the word. So yeah, he'll play tonight, and I think I think he'll be incredibly difficult on himself if they lose and don't make Worlds, because that's the type of person he is. But for me, like if they don't win and T1 fails to qualify for Worlds, what they got to figure out, in my opinion, is jungle. I don't think Kuz and Elam are bad players, but like they just haven't had since Blank and Bengi. They've not had players that seem to gel well in the jungle role. Like Clit is a fantastic player, but he was not a T1 player in the sense of the way they like to play the game, and that was my issue with him on that team last year. Like they've got to figure out what they're gonna do with jungle this offseason, and it is the glaring omission of their part of their team. Because stylistically they just haven't had it figured out in what seems like a long time. Like people may remember Bengi and Blank fondly, but that was actually a long time ago that they had those guys on that team. So
Jacob,
yeah.
guess who just got military service?
Bengi. or you can just go just pay Tarzan.
No, I'm not. I don't think Bengi is coming back, guys. But he did actually just get out of military service.
Just go pay Tarzan.
Hey,
like
didn't that happen
$3.
to Forgiven? He went for military service, then he ended up on an LEC
How did
team
that
for a little while.
How did that end up?
I'm not saying how it ended up. I'm saying that he did end up on an LEC team this year.
He did. He came
for
back
a little bit for a cup of coffee. For one of these. So we have plenty of time to discuss all the fallout on future programming, but let's just turn our attention to something a little bit more serious. Emily wrote a story on ESPN.com/esports. Damwon's Nuguri is going to get surgery for a collapsed lung, which means that he will be traveling to Shanghai later than expected. This is part of Emily's article. Nuguri was scheduled to leave South Korea to head to China for Worlds on Friday, but will now fly to Shanghai on September 18th. Nuguri is expected to make a full recovery, according to a statement from Damwon, scheduled to be released from hospital on September 13th. So first of all, quick recovery to Nuguri. Hopefully everything goes well, everything goes according to plan, and he's able to join the team at Worlds. Assuming that does happen, Emily.
Oh no, I was gonna say he has had the surgery and it was successful. Like he's already recovering. He's like, I'm not gonna go like he's fine, but like it was successful. He seems to be recovering really well. I know that they will make sure that he's okay and stuff like that. So they did say that in their statement.
God, what a terrifying time to have a collapsed lung. By the way, you're about to travel internationally in the middle of a pandemic whose effects has a severe impact on your lungs. Like, yeah, being immunocompromised right now does not sound like a good time. So yeah, Jesus.
Well, and that must have been scary for him reporting the symptoms, right? Like the day after you win the finals in like a really convincing fashion, you're like, oh, my chest hurts and I have shortness of breath, which is one of the symptoms, of COVID, right? So yeah, it must have been really scary, and we wish all the best to Nuguri and hope he recovers quickly.
Glad to hear the surgery went well, and hopefully he's able to join his team with a full recovery so that that team can be at full strength while competing at Worlds. Now let's shift our attention to the LEC. G2 winning yet another split, and the conversation that I would love for the three of you to have actually plays in perfectly to a comment in chat that will really start things off here. And this is actually in response to our top 20 players conversation that we will have on Friday. This is what It's Leo says in chat. Let me get through the whole thing before we discuss. I think there is an argument for Caps being the best player coming into this Worlds. At the very least, in terms of accomplishments in the last 2 years, he did way more than players like Showmaker and Knight. He literally made back-to-back Worlds finals and won MSI as MVP, Pog. So this is a conversation that is happening right now as it pertains to Caps. It started as, is he the best mid laner in the world, or in that conversation, or in the West, I should say, sorry. And then it started as, is he the best player in the West, period? And then it became, is he the best player from the West of all time in League of Legends? Where do we land on that conversation?
The answer
I mean,
is yes.
I think he's the best player in the West right now.
No, he's best Western player of all time. There's no argument there. Look at, I posted it on Twitter. Look at his last 6 years. He's been in 6 LEC seasons the last 3 years. He's won every single one of them. He's been to 2 MSIs. He's won 1, got 3rd, 4th in the other. And he's been to 2 Worlds, and he's been silver medalist twice. He's the only Western player to ever go back-to-back Western Finals.
Different teams, by the way.
On 2 different teams.
Rival teams.
He's the greatest Western player of all time. The only argument against him is perks, and I think you need to have a very nuanced argument on Perks' his selflessness, him being a captain, and how the intangibles might sway that argument over to Perks, where he is, he gave his natural role to satisfy Caps, and we've seen that Perks is a better AD carry than Caps. You can say maybe that Perks is a better all-around player. He brings a leadership role that Caps doesn't. But in just terms of a game-breaking type of player, a player And I remember this, and I remember back in 2015, 2014, 2016, and people thought this was Bjergsen. They thought maybe he could be that player, because we've seen Faker, and we've seen, Dade, and we've seen these game-breaking players, and I remember we've always, in the West, it was always like, when are we going to find that kind of player? When are we going to have our Faker? When are we going to have our Dade? When are we going to have a player who can 1v9, who can change an entire script in a millisecond? Like, where are these, like, this prodigy type player that is not only great in the West, not only a great Western player, but a great international world-class superstar? And I think Caps has shown the last 2 years, the last 3 years really, that he is that type of player, that he is not only a superstar Western player, but he's a superstar no matter where he is. He is a player that's talents are just as good as, he's mechanically as good as any other player in the world, and he's improved and he's matured as a player. Like, it's insane of how much he's not only improved as a player, but as a person in the last few years. And seeing his growth and interviewing the guy and seeing him just grow from tournament to tournament, there's no question. And this guy grinds this game like almost no other. Like, as someone who's interviewed Caps and Faker throughout the years, like they do share a lot of similarities. And when you ask both of them, like, what do you like to do outside of League of Legends? Like, do you go to, the movies, or like, what do you do fun? It's like their fun time is playing more League of Legends. Their fun is finding new ways to master the game. Like, it's fun for them when they can sit down and play a game of League of Legends. They feel like they got something new to their arsenal. Where these guys aren't just playing the game, they're masters of the game. And, like, this game isn't only their profession, but it's their life as a whole. And everything else, a lot of times, is just white noise. And for me, Caps is the greatest Western player of all time. We can put on nostalgia glasses and try to act like the players of old, and, Season 1 tournaments matter, but Caps is the greatest Western player of all time. Perks is number 2. The sky's the limit. Like, it's scary. Like, before long, we're gonna have to say Wonder and Yankos are 3 and 4. Like, there's a world where in the next few years, where all 5 G2 players, we just say, yeah, 1 to 5, these are the greatest Western players of all time. They're that damn good.
The 2 things that I want to bring up in this discussion are, the first is just general criteria for top 20. So mine is top 20 going into Worlds 2020 from this regular season, which is why I don't necessarily count Caps' previous performances. Someone else might, but I'm just saying, as individual criteria, we're probably all going to be bringing our own criteria to the table. So that's something to keep in mind. The second thing is that I think there are 3 players actually that can be considered for this. It's Caps, it's Perks, as you mentioned, and it's also, I feel like you have to mention Reckless here. He has been, and like, this isn't like a lull early tournaments thing. He was in my opinion, still like definitely the best tournament of its time, one of the best tournaments of all time, given storylines and just how many like really basic League of Legends concepts we saw growing during this tournament in IPL 5, which happened after the Season 2 World Championship. And he was too young to play in the LCS, initially, the EU LCS. And that's how long Reckless has been around, and he has been consistently at the top. And I know like people have very, like, Reckless is a very polarizing person. There's this, Reckless is like way overhyped, and then there's this backlash where Reckless is the best player in the world, and it doesn't seem like people, it seems like people kind of vacillate wildly between those 2 things. But I do think if you're going to have a conversation about best Western player of all time, then Reckless should certainly be in that conversation. That being said, my personal pick, and this is again going off of like intangibles in addition to performance. So while I would say that Caps is a more like probably mechanically skilled player at this point, my vote would actually be for Perks. I think he is G2, and he has been G2 since he like came onto this organization. It's not just selflessness, but a really fundamental understanding of the game and how to play the game that has allowed him to make that role swap so successful. And there are very few players that would be able to do that with the greatest amount of success that Perks has had, and additionally have been able to go contend for a world's title. Like, yes, people tend to write off G2's entire season just based on their Worlds performance last year, which I think is really unfair. It's kind of similar to how I was mad that people were writing off RNG's 2018 because they lost at Worlds. I don't think people should discredit how good G2 were for the majority of last year. They were the team of 2019. And I say this as an LPL fan too, so, you know. I think that, like, Perks, it's really tough between Perks and Caps. I think Reckless should also be in that conversation. And I think it really comes down to your criteria and how much you do value a lot of intangibles. Because, like, for example, when we saw Cap's role swap, right? We saw him understand, like, there would be times where you would see him, like, setting the wave exactly correctly, right? Like, you could tell he understood exactly how he, like, should play, and the execution just wasn't as high level, and his overall understanding of the map wasn't as high level as Perks was, in my opinion, and that's what makes Perks such a successful, like, swap. He was just a lot more comfortable in that position from the get-go. But you can see that Cap still has, like, a really good fundamental understanding of, like, how League of Legends should be played. So it's an interesting conversation. I think you have to look at a lot of minutia when they play on the map, and you can compare their mid lane and their bot lane, so that's kind of fun.
So I think Perks is the best Western player of all time. I think Caps is the best Western player in the world right now. Between NA and EU, he is the best player combined in those regions. Caps has had a banner summer. Obviously, he won the MVP, and I'm not just saying it because of that, because I think, to Emily's point, he looked really messy in the spring, right? Like, it was clear that he was a much better mid laner than he is an AD carry, and he wasn't even just a much better mid laner, he was a dominant mid laner. What a, like, banner season for him, MVP or not, right? Like, if somebody else would have won that award in a different position, like, Caps is still the best mid laner in all of Europe, and I think that, to Tyler's point, like, that success the past few years is really sort of, like, it keeps continuing to compound. Perks has done it for longer, though. And much like Reckless, actually, Perks could have been in the league sooner if not for Age-Rolls. Perks was hindered by that too, right? Like, Perks' first season in the EU LCS was the first season he was old enough to play. And I knew Perks back then, and I would say he probably wasn't mature enough as an individual to play in the EU LCS at a high level until the season he actually came into it. But still, I think that Caps is a better player right now, but I think that historically, if you look at the entire thing, it is Perks.
You want to bring up one?
You say that, though.
One thing.
Go ahead, Emily. Sorry.
Oh no, I just want to bring up one thing super quickly, because if you're going to say that about Reckless and you're going to say that about Perks, it's also worth mentioning Caps could have gone to Worlds with Xerxes in 2000 and 15 or 16?
16.
He was too young, and they were both playing on a Turkish team that
Dark
actually
Passage,
didn't make it through the wildcard qualifier because Caps and Xerxes could not play because they would not have been able to qualify for the World Championship. So if you're going to count that for Reckless and Perks, I just want to bring up, you also have to count it for Caps, because he was very well known. Like, people were like, this kid is going to be insane. Yep. And he was already playing and super successful in Turkey.
My last point on this would be, I do agree that, like, G2 is Perks, and I do agree that Reckless is Fnatic. My argument of why I think Caps is the greatest of all time is, I think if you take Perks and you throw him on Rogue, if you throw him on a different org, he's going to struggle. I think the infrastructure and the belief that Carlos and him has in him and enables Perks to be that leader really sets him up for success. And I'm not taking anything away from Perks. I think he is one of the greatest Western players of all time. He's number 2 in my book, right behind Caps. Very, very close. And I think exactly the same with Reckless, where Fnatic enables him, right? We saw how he did on, Elements, that one split where he, said, peace out to Fnatic, I can do this on my own. You couldn't do it on his own. Fnatic helps Reckless be as great as he can be, and Reckless in turn makes Fnatic as great as it can be. Where I think you take Cap and you throw him on any European team, any Western team, maybe even any team in the world, I think he is a game changer. I don't think that is... I do think G2 obviously, when you have players at top level in almost every single row, it's going to make things easier. But I do believe that where Perks is more flexible in terms of just playing different positions, and I think Reckless has the longevity factor to his name, I think Caps is a player where you can pluck him and put him on any org, and I think he excels just as well.
I mean, Caps going to G2 is the biggest roster change in Western history ever. Because of the impact that it had. They took him from a team that literally went to the finals of the World Championship the year before and stuck him on a team with his rival for best mid laner in Europe, right? Like that the impacts that has had on the LEC for the past 2 years are cannot be understated. But yeah, I mean, and I think that's important. Like Caps was a dominant force on Fnatic back then, and that meant a lot. But yeah, I still think Perks historically is he's just done it longer. Like he's done it longer. He's been more successful for a longer amount of time.
We've also seen Perks with other lineups when he was a mid laner. I mean, like yes, it was on G2, but
yeah, he played with Yarnin and Wadid
and
freaking
the semifinals.
He played with.
I think he'd be fine if
I'd say he'd be fine.
I think he'd be fine if you plugged him on another team.
Of course.
I just want to sprinkle in just some insight on many of the things all of you mentioned. So in regards to Perks and the identity of G2, I think it was, who said that? Actually, I think all three of you have said a variation of that. The last time I spoke with Carlos, it was a great interview, and one of the things he said was, I can see Perks being a lifer here. What he meant by that was he could retire as a player with G2, become an executive of G2, and eventually become a part owner of G2. This is how far in advance. Yeah, this is how far in advance Carlos has thought about this and wants this for Perks. So that's definitely in his plans anyway.
He said that Perks spent the entire Christmas holiday at his house with him and his wife and his child. Like Perks is a part of. He is the identity of G2. He was on the team that qualified into the EULCS in the first place when they weren't even a part of the league, right? Like back when relegation was a thing. So he's been there for a while, but I mean, you do have to give him credit for carrying people like Emperor and Hybrid to a finals win, and also Yarnin and Wadid. No hate to any of those people, but those are not as good as he's gotten right now. Even like transitioning himself, he's a better AD carry than any AD carry he's ever played with, and also Mickey X is the best support that G2 has ever had on their lineup. So yeah, I mean, he's played with some pretty bad players on the world stage and has done a good job for them. So I will give him some credit.
TSM World Champs 2019 says this about this conversation in chat.
What a name.
I'll take well, I mean, maybe you can change it. Maybe you can change it to TSM World Champs 2020. Just change the username. You'll be fine. You're not verified. It's okay. I'll take Perks over Caps, though. Caps is a mechanical beast, yes, but Perks has the bigger package and lasted longer. So, like, the bigger thing to offer to G2 and has lasted longer, obviously, with the longevity of him on the team. So
I'll say I don't think this is like, even though I'm obviously like going to bat for Perks and I think it's Perks, like I don't think there's like a wrong answer here. Like if someone believes it's Caps, I'm not going to be like, you're crazy, you're stupid. You know what I mean? Like that's what makes this discussion so interesting, because I think it reveals what people value a lot about.
It's Kobe Shaq.
Somebody said Horse's Pawn 42 in chat said Perks is Curry, Caps is Durant on the Golden State Warriors, which is actually not a terrible comparison.
No, yeah.
Perks has been there for a while and taken them very far, and then like adding Caps was just like the extra sauce on top of like, okay, now we're definitely the best team in the league, like by a wide margin, right? Like
Caps is technically better than Perks, but I think the soul of the team and sometimes the X factor of the team, kind of the reason why I think G2 was so feared last year, even when Caps was having some of his craps games, is that Perks was always on point, especially with Zion. And there was the reason why the Chinese audience started calling him Poozy. It wasn't because of a meme. It's because they were saying Perks as this like ultra high level AD carry that has warranted the fact that he should be compared to China's favorite son and Uzi. So you can't lose on this argument. Like I mean, Reckless, Perks, Caps. Like the most fun thing is like, we're not done rewriting the story, right? Like, if Reckless somehow wins Worlds this year, he's the greatest, right? Like, you can't, like, I think if Reckless can win Worlds first, I think he takes the title, right? Like, I think everyone's waiting to see which Western player can lift the Summer's Cup for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question about G2 also, is like, can they do as well as they did last year? This year's been way more shaky for them than last year was leading up to the World Championship. And obviously, like, Perks' father passing away, like, it sort of hit them like the freaking bag of bricks in the middle of the summer, and then like they were super inconsistent. They lost that Fnatic playoff series, the first one, not the second one. This has been a much more difficult year for them. I think they're better because of it, because adversity always makes everyone better, and these players are good about sort of coming together and not tilting off the face of the mid. But like generally, this is not like the G2 of 2019 where they ran everyone over and then they got the world championship and just couldn't make it work at the very end.
Let me
this
ask
is a very different team.
Here's my transition question to all of you. Let's say, hypothetical, I know this is a lull statement, and chat, you can feel free to throw it in chat here. Let's say TSM make it very far in Worlds. I'll go so far as to say let's say they make it to finals, and Bjergsen's a big part of that. Where does he land in this conversation?
Top 5.
Yeah, he's top.
Not as good as
not as good.
Caps.
If he wins Worlds, it's a conversation. And I'll say that right now. It's a conversation.
Sorry,
if he wins Worlds, and I'm not saying this is likely. I'm not even saying but if Bjergsen and TSM win Worlds this year, he's in the conversation, and there's a big argument that he is the greatest Western player of all time. I know we're laughing.
I'm so sorry.
I know we're laughing, but in that
I
world,
can't help it. I was just looking at Emily, and I have to laugh too. I get the giggles now.
No, but much like Perks though, like he is like Bjergsen has put some really garbage on. He's put some garbage on his back and like really performed.
Yeah.
Like, let's not remember that Bjergsen used to play with Glebe Glarbu, and actually, like, that TS team was not bad. The only reason they made a roster change is because they couldn't beat C9, right? Like, come on. Like, Bjergsen's put some really, like, dudes...
That's
dudes
a name I've not heard.
like, come on. Dude has worked at a dump and, like, put those big bags of trash on his back and made it work.
The thing about the thing about North American players is that they need the world champ. Like, they need a high placing world championship finish to really strengthen their domestic legacy. So right now for Bjergsen, he has 7 league titles, 4 MVPs, almost won his 5th this year. He still is lacking any sort of success at Worlds. His greatest success at Worlds is taking a game off Samsung White at 2014 Worlds.
Which you could argue Samsung White trolled the living hell out of him.
They did. They played all melee. It was a troll.
They played all melee and they ran in level 1 like a bag of bozos, man. Yeah. Like those guys. Yeah. Let's made like idiots.
For Bjergsen, it's a thing of his domestic legacy is certain. He's him and Doublelift, just like Perks and Caps are number 1 and 2, however you want to argue it, as the greatest North American players of all time for the LCS. But for him to strengthen that legacy, to actually be in the conversation of Caps or Perks, he's gonna have to win or go very close to winning something at a Worlds or MSI. Also, before we change the subject, I don't want to overlook Jensen, where Jensen might lack some of the domestic success, doesn't have an MVP award, but he has made a top 4 at 2018 with Cloud9 at Worlds, and he made a Worlds at MSI final last year. I think the thing holding Jensen back is that in both of those cases, MSI final got smashed by G2, which just pushes him down the Western Legacy ranking, and same thing with Cloud9 in 2018. Another Western team, another Caps play, and Caps just pushes them down. So I think Jensen and Bjergsen are both way outside the conversation, but it just takes one tournament, guys. Just think of a world where TSM versus Team Liquid World Finals 2020. What a bubble world that would be.
Jacob is losing his mind right now at the thought of this.
It's a possibility.
I just imagine that, like, if that happens, that, like, Faker sits somewhere, even if he doesn't make it, sits somewhere in Korea, just like, what have I done by not being there?
Hey man,
hand in, face in palms.
Bjergsen might have eliminated in the quarterfinals. Who knows? But for Bjergsen and Jensen, this is again, I think more so than even Caps and Perks. This is a big tournament for them. I think especially Bjergsen. I interviewed Bjergsen, so have you, Arda, and I asked him how does it feel to be back at Worlds? How would it feel to be back at Worlds after so many years? And he told me, straight out, making Worlds is not an accomplishment. Doing damage at Worlds, going far at Worlds, that's an accomplishment I could be proud of.
Like, the dude's been there multiple times.
Yeah.
And like, TSM just always struggles to deliver when it matters most, right? Like, the furthest they've made it is quarters. Like, I think people are happy that they're back because they've been gone for long enough now, right? But, like, so, pat on the back there or whatever. But yeah, I mean, like the conversation we've had NA teams that did fairly well at the World Championship, not that long ago. The Cloud9 team that made top 4, right? Like, and they weren't even the best team in NA at that point. That was still a Liquid team as the best team
They
in
came
NA.
from play-ins.
Exactly. You make my point. So, you know, like the making it there is not as much of an accomplishment as actually making it a little bit further. So, but yeah, I mean, I think Bjergsen definitely deserves his due. And he's definitely had also a very good summer for himself. But I just think that like until he really has something else besides an IEM title, I'm not including him in this conversation.
And IEM world title, by the way. I just want to put the world in the IEM title.
Against a 12th place
world champions.
A 12th
Don't take it away from me.
A 12th place WE and a Coup Tigers, or whatever they were called at the time, who couldn't sleep at all in Germany. GE Tigers at the time that couldn't sleep at all, that felt like garbage, and trolled the tournament because they felt like garbage. Yes, let me tell you more about that title.
Let me tell you more about Glebe Glarbu. He played on TSM from May until October 2014. For those
Glebe makes my the most outlandish political social media post I've ever seen nowadays. So you know, I still follow Glebe from time to time, but
he also
he's out
played
there.
on Evil Geniuses and he ended his career on Ember. Anyway, back to TSM. Listen, we just had a very positive, I guess you can call it mostly anyway, about TSM conversation, but we weren't always so positive about TSM on this fair program, and so sometimes we have to check ourselves and we have to call ourselves out, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. Roll the tape. TSM. Jacob, tell me something. Tell me about TSM right now. How do they lose to Immortals this week? What is going on with this team? What are the challenges that you are noticing here?
Seems bad. Like I don't know what more to say, right?
Wow.
Like,
I don't think they're bad. I don't, they're not amazing, but I don't think they're bad.
like the stats that we have on screen right now, like obviously point to everyone except Bjergsen and Double Lift because they're the carries. But like I think this team collectively should take some blame here. And I've been very unimpressed by this team. I thought this team would be a lot better. I thought they would make the World Championship. I'm having some serious doubts here midway through the split.
But I mean, since then, Jacob, you've been pretty complimentary, at least on this program.
Hey, I'm not going to take back what I said because after those losses, they did look like a bad team, and they were a bad team. What has changed since then, and what has changed since now, is that Broken Blade and Spica have definitely leveled up, and I want to give a lot of love to the both of them. They looked very good in this final, and other than the miss-smite or the smite steal against Golden Guardians earlier, where Closer stole from Spica in the first Golden Guardian series that TSM lost in this playoff, Spica has actually looked really good. He's reached a level that I thought was possible, but I was worried that may not be achievable because this team, it just comes with so much pressure for someone like that, and junglers historically have had an issue on TSM in terms of being able to give time to grow, but they've given it to him. I actually do want to point to something on that regard. I talked to Sven not all that long ago for something I was working on about C9, and I was talking to him about the expectations that he had for TSM last year. And something that he said to me that he wished TSM 2019 would have done differently was during the summer would have stuck with one jungler. If you remember, they were constantly back between Greg, Acadia, and then eventually Spica, right? But the thing is with TSM is like it is a difficult team to play on from a pressure perspective. They have more fans than any other in North America, and that is really difficult if you are a young player. I think by sticking with Spica, even in moments where he did not look good this season after they got rid of Dardoch, I think that he's been able to grow significantly. Broken Blade had a fantastic playoff also. I think that these two guys may not get as much love because they're not a name like Bjergsen or Double Lift, but I think that they deserve it. And even though like Double Lift looked much better at the beginning of this split than he did in playoffs, he looked fine in the final. But like when they played GGs, like he looked outclassed by FBI significantly. Like where you could argue that FBI is the best AD carry in all of North America potentially, right? Like in terms of like how much do you want to argue that against Finn? But still, For me, I think that Double Lift is now in the conversation of the liability of this team, whereas I was very impressed by Spica and Bergenblade's performance over the past couple of weeks, and I think that they deserve a lot of love. So I don't take back what I said. They did look really bad back then. I think that those two guys have grown in particular, and I think that Bjergsen is continue to be Bjergsen. He is the best mid laner in North America. And so that all of those things coming together, that is why they are NA LCS champion.
Unlike Jacob here, my friend and fellow colleague, I will take back what I said. I will apologize for what I said. About a month or so ago, I made fun of Spica. He was having a rough patch. I said he's playing like someone who doesn't realize that his keyboard's not connected to his computer. I thought he looked out of water. He was being dominated by most of the junglers in the league. He didn't look like he was comfortable. And I'm here to say I'm a clown. I was wrong. I was dead wrong about Spica, and I apologize for my wrong take. Because sometimes you just have to stand up and say you was wrong. And I'm not saying Spica is going to be a world beater. I'm not saying he's going to go to Worlds and he's going to, take down Kanavi and Canyon and raise the Summoners Cup on, October 31st in Shanghai. But he's a damn good player. And every single time he's been pushed against the wall. When clowns like me have said, he's just another ward in the long line of failed prospects of the TSM jungle, he has stepped up. Be it with the River Shen, be it with, the Jarvan, doesn't really matter. Every time that TSM need him in the playoffs, especially after losing the Golden Guardians in the first round, he saved their tails a lot of times. Bjergsen obviously is the MVP of the team. They're not there without Bjergsen, but honestly, they're not champions. They're probably not going to Worlds without Spica either. So I also want to give a shout out to someone. I remember I was at Scouting Rounds. I believe Emily was there too. Scouting Rounds 2017. When Spica, Blabber, Vulcan, Kumo, the most stacked Scouting Grounds class we've ever had. And I remember when they were first doing the initial drafts, where teams of like Team Infernal and Team Ocean and Team Mountain were drafting their players, TSM and Parth were on Team Infernal. And I remember how confident and how much they wanted Spica. He was their number one draft pick, and Parth wanted to play with Spica. He thought a lot about him. And I think it's something that we've kind of overlooked through all this, is that Parth is back leading the team after kind of being exiled. The TSM fans turned on him. They said, oh, he doesn't know how to draft. He only gets us to Worlds, but he doesn't get us out of groups. And then for the last 2 years, TSM hasn't even made it to Worlds. So I've never dogged on Parth. I think Parth's always been one of the better coaches from what I know. I can't really say anything just because I'm not in the rooms, but from everything I've heard, he's a very smart guy. I've talked to him a bunch of times. I'm just from I think Perf deserves a lot of credit, but for Spica, from my point of view, from what I've said, I apologize because I was dead wrong. He's an incredible talent and he has a lot of potential. I don't know where that potential is going to take him. I don't know if he can reach the highest highs of a world-class player. But when I've sat here for the last 9 months saying Blabber, is a generational player, and he's the chance to be the most mechanically skilled, NA jungler of all time, I have to sit here and say that Spica might have the same ceiling, because from what we've seen in the last few weeks, he's a very special talent. He's the youngest player in the LCS. So while TSM might not go super far at Worlds, I think this next month or so of Spica getting to play against the best players in the world is going to rapidly improve his standing as a player, and I think we're going to see a lot better of Spica going forward after this experience. So I apologize, Spica. You're a rock star.
Spica, I think the big thing to remember is that he was drafted by Echo Fox. But I watched him because I followed that TSM team. And there was a conversation he actually ended up having with Mike Young, who was on TSM at the time and who did a lot of the he really enjoyed coaching the Scouting Grounds players. They picked Spica because no one knew about him. They were just like, oh, here's this 16-year-old kid who's performing really well on the ladder. And I remember Parth saying we want to see how well he'll respond to any sort of coaching, right? Because he is someone like that can be incredibly malleable because they haven't had any sort of coaching experience, and they arguably haven't even had a ton of ladder experience, right? Where you have these other guys who've been on the ladder for forever and they're all friends. Spica was not that. He was completely, no one really knew about him. And when he performed really well, he was drafted by Echo Fox. But the thing I will agree with is that I think TSM always had their eye on him, especially because Spica was underage and decided, I really want to go back to school. Like, there's an interview I did with him at the beginning of the year where he goes through all this. And he talked to Mike Young about it at that scouting grounds. It was like, I think, Mike Young was like, it'll be here, if you're good enough, it'll be here, and you should go to school and finish high school. And he did. And I think, I think TSM, like, I don't think they bookmarked him, but I think they always kind of had an eye on him, right? Even before he came onto the team officially. And then the other thing about Spica is that I think I'm not going to say that, because I had a lot of criticism for him mid-summer as well. I think the big thing about him is two things. One, something that Jacob brought up and something you could see in their drafting all year is that were willing to draft Spica some picks that you might not want to put him on a cane, right? Like, that's a very risky pick. But what it tells me is that we trust this player to be able to play this. And that says a lot to a young player, right? It says that your team is behind you. Like, we don't want you to be like this rookie looking up to your older brothers and feel like you're afraid to talk to us, feel like you're afraid to speak up and draft about what you want. That's not what we want. And Bjergsen told me this directly. Like, that's not what they wanted from Spica. They don't want him to be afraid to talk to Bjergsen or Doublelift or someone who has like a legacy. They want him to be part of the team. And I think that reflects in some of the picks that they've drafted him. But I also think one thing that struck Spica, because I'm not going to necessarily say he didn't make mistakes, because he made a ton of mistakes, right? He is a rookie jungler for TSM, which is, its own can of worms. But I think one thing that happens with a lot of Spica's mistakes is a lot of them were visually easy, right? Like, so he made two types of mistakes that junglers typically make. Some of them are just in like pathing and decision making, which aren't going to be as obvious. But the miss smites, the really, like, if the pathing is like super egregious, they'll point it out on cast, or some of his like just missed execution and team fights, like anything like that. Like, I was comparing it in voice chat the other day to a friend to Huhi, and why people kind of tended to undervalue Huhi when he was a mid is because he made a lot of very visually obvious mistakes, and then the things he was really good at, like knowledge of side lanes and split pushing and stuff like that, weren't as visually obvious, right? So it's really easy to see where Spica messed up in a lot of ways. And I think that kind of contributed to a lot of the fan backlash against him, which is unfortunate. I'm not saying that he didn't make those mistakes, obviously, but it's unfortunate that that created kind of a this weird like backlash of the community, blaming him and being like, this is why TSM is doing really badly. I think it speaks to how much this team trusted Spica, that they were like, no, we're sticking with him. We're not making changes. This is our guy. And their drafting and their like execution has shown that. And so I'm glad that the team stood behind him and allowed him to grow as a player.
And I just want to make one quick point about Broken Blade too. This team, one thing that has been really obvious is that the bot lane has struggled and sometimes to really pick up the mantle, right? Like, this is team solo mid, and sometimes they do just win because Bjergsen's just insane and very, very good at his job. But Broken Blade actually, throughout playoff and throughout certain parts of the year, has been able to give them a carry champion that they can play around, things like Camille, etc., that do a massive amount of damage. And I think that he deserves credit for that, because in a world where bot lane, in a world where Doublelift plays a ton of Ashe and Senna, which are effective for what they are, but not, they're not going to carry the entire game for you unless he's incredibly fed. Broken Blade has been able to give them that other sort of carry power. And I think that Broken Blade deserves a lot of credit as well. Also, like FBI, I think a lot of people underrate him because he's from a minor region. And I think that given the fact that both of them have been able to come to NA and find success, you have to give love to Broken Blade and FBI both.
So this is how we're going to end the show here on Rift Rewind. We're going to give you a little bit of a hypothetical 2020 World Championships. We're going to set the scene and give you a completely fabricated hypothetical group stage. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to present the group stages, and then my esteemed colleagues are going to debate which teams will make it out of that group stage. But I'm going to make it a little fun. I'm going to have my phone, and I'm going to time you. You're only going to have 3 minutes to decide which 2 teams will make it out of each group. I'm going to be timing you. I'm going to keep you honest on the timing. You can all free-for-all discuss whether it takes 5 seconds or whether it takes all 3 minutes. You will tell me by the end of the 3 minutes or less which 2 teams will advance from these hypothetical group stages. So to set the table even further, I asked my colleagues earlier today, okay, well, that obvious question here is, what about the play-in stage? So I said, give me 4 teams that you want from the play-in stage for this exercise. And so the 4 teams have been selected, and you will see them as we unveil each group stage. And just so that everybody is clear and everybody knows the rules, it is 1 region represented per group and 1 selected from each pot, which is available online in terms of which teams are qualified into which pot, etc. So without further ado, I selected these. My colleagues have not seen them, and now they will debate. I'm just going to pull up my stopwatch right here. Here is Group A, which consists of TSM, JD, Rogue, and either Supermassive or Unicorns of Love. That was the only one where it was left ambiguous, so I said just pick one of the 2. Ready, set, go.
All right, JD Game is number 1. Let's just move on. JD is number 1, Supermassive or Unicorns of Love. I'm going to say Unicorns of Love. I think Unicorns of Love are a slightly better team.
Or 4. However, so here would be my argument. I think that Rogue would be number 2 out of this group over TSM. And this is not because I'm a TSM hater, but I think actually if you put Unicorns of Love in this group, or Supermassive, but I would say Unicorns of Love has a better chance. I actually think they could take some games off of the European or North American teams.
Yeah,
maybe enough to be a difference maker. Not enough to actually qualify out, but enough to help the odds of one of the other North American or European team, TSM or Rogue, get out. That would be my thought. I think Rogue is stylistically better as a team than TSM. I think that TSM has a better X factor in certain players, i.e. Bjergsen. My biggest question for Rogue, I was writing some of our LEC Regional Fan Guide today, has been whether or not they can actually perform when it matters. I had this giant question over their head about international events. In a group like this, though, I think that they could win out.
I would say, yeah, JD is number 1. That's easy. I actually think Unicorns of Love could maybe sneak out of this group. I actually am a big...
Wow.
No, I
Russia,
think,
baby.
Well, it's Russia. It's also you have to think about it.
They're like the best minor region team,
Oh,
especially now that Vietnam is not sending a team to main event.
Even there, though, I wouldn't say like I think CIS is overlooked. Look at the last 2 years of CIS at Worlds. Gambit lost 3-2 in a narrow series that C9 probably should have lost in Korea in the qualifier finals, where Gambit almost made it to the group stages. The Cloud9 team made semifinals at Worlds. Last year, Splice versus Unicorns of Love, a very similar, the core of the Unicorns of Love team is still there. No Man's in the mid lane is still there, their star player. They were 1 game away from knocking out Splice from Worlds.
1 minute left.
They should have knocked them out of the Worlds. So, again, Splice made quarterfinals. I think Unicorns of Love takes a game or 2 off of some of these teams. Oh my god. I think Broken Blade's X Factor. I think Broken Blade could... I love Finn. I think Finn's a really good player. I don't think he's in his best form right now. I think Broken Blade is in his best form. I think Broken Blade could be the X Factor over Rogue. I'm going to say TSM. I'm a North American homer. JD number 1. TSM number 2 for me.
30 seconds.
I didn't really get to talk that much, but what I will say is that I think this group would end up a lot like the FPX group that we saw last year, where it would end up being Rogue and JD Gaming facing each other in a tiebreaker to see who was the first seed out of this group. Because I also think that, yes, Chinese teams have a chance to drop things in a best of or a single game format. So.
Like that you call yourself one.
Doubters.
So
Doubters.
I will
JD
try to
and
correct
Unicorns?
myself mid-sentence.
I got voted off, so yeah, it's 2-1.
What's
so.
the final answer?
JDG and
JG and
Rogue.
Rogue.
Yeah, I got outvoted. Just remember that I picked TSM in this matter. Sorry, Rogue, I love you.
I was just going to say, I appreciate that Emily corrected herself and didn't say best of 1, because best of 1 is a stupid term and we don't use it around here. But
Never.
yes.
Never. By the way, side note, If you want to see a really cool setup for a final, check out how Supermassive won in the TCL in the last split. The scene, like the whole CGI that they used and the overlays and everything, really, really cool. So definitely go check that out if you want to see a cool presentation. It was very, very well done. All right, Group B. Here is your second group. Emily, I'm going to start with you on this one. Group B consists of Top Esports, DRX, Machi Esports, and Mad Lions.
Oh man, this is a fun group actually, just because DRX, I am not high on them, and I know Tyler agrees with me on this, because right now, like in their current form, they're basically Chovy, and that hasn't always been the case with this team, but right now that's kind of what they've been in playoffs.
Damn it, Carrie! At the moment I started hyping you up.
I mean, I still think Carrie is a great player, but
Daft is kind of
Top is a team that I will say, even when they mess up really terribly, they can beat you in a 5v5 just based on pure mechanical team fighting. So unlike JDG, where I think they'd have more of an FPX trajectory where they lose their first game and everyone's like, this team is trash, they're LGD 2015, this is going to be terrible. By the way, we have LGD 2020 this year, so look forward to that. But yeah, I think it's TES won. The second team is really interesting, though. I would have said Mad Lions previously, but they looked really shaky in playoffs, like really, really
another team that I have major concerns about when pressure is on.
And DRX is another team, didn't look super great.
They got Chovy though. They got Chovy. You know what Mad Lions doesn't have? Mad Lions don't have Chovy. Sorry, Humanoid. I like ya, but you're gonna get rolled by Chovy.
So okay. So I think this comes down, the DRX and Mad discussion comes down to the top side of the map. Jungle and top in particular. Arome does not stand out. To me any more than anyone else. But Shadow, I think, is so much better than Piosic.
Chovy.
Generally. I get you. Chovy is great. He is a top 5 player in the world, in my opinion. I'm not disputing this.
Behind the top 5.
He is fantastic. He is fantastic. However, his team is not so fantastic outside of Kyria lately, and I actually think Kaiser is like, if anyone's gonna give Kyria some grief, as good as he is, like Kaiser is actually really good. Kaiser is really good. So like, I don't believe in Mad because they've let me down in terms of when like the pressure's on. This team is not good when like the pressure has been on for them. They're very inexperienced, but Shadow is just like miles ahead of Piosic.
This is TES, and then all of the 3 teams. I actually don't think Piosic is nearly as bad as you think he is, but all of the other 3 teams just kind of battling it out. It might be DRX. I'll probably go with DRX, but like this wouldn't be a shock if. I mean, Machi probably has a pretty big say in who makes it out of this group as well.
Also, yes.
Chovy will slap the... You guys are foolish. Chovy just dragged DRX over Gen.G.
I just said I picked DRX second.
Chovy literally 1v9 Gen.G. Top esports
all right, you convinced me. I'm going DRX. I'm going DRX second.
I was like, I said DRX second. Why am I being attacked?
Time's up.
Because you don't give enough respect to Chovy.
I said DRX is literally Chovy.
So Top Esports and DRX, is that what we're saying?
Yes. No. The real answer here is Top Esports and Chovy. There's no...
Okay, got it. By the way, now you know exactly how Friday's going to go.
Yeah,
it's just going to be Tyler repeating Chovy every 3 minutes.
Chovy.
Chovy. For 3 hours.
Make sure to get headache medication.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine several hours of Chovy? Oh my gosh.
No,
okay,
I can't.
So Group A, you got JD and Rogue advancing. Group B, you got TES and DRX advancing. Now, here's Group C. Jacob, we're starting with you on this one. Group C consists of G2, Suning, either T1 or Gen.G, and Team Liquid. How about that MSI final from 2019?
Emily, how much will you kill me if I say the Chinese team doesn't make it out of this group?
I mean, I think Suning are... I don't know how to explain what Suning are. They're the most standard team that China is sending. I'll say that.
Correct.
I think a lot of it is going to depend on whether the bot lane meta shifts. again, because if we go back to like Xayah, Kaisa, I think that could end up being either really good or really bad for Suning, depending. Right now, Huanfeng's been performing really well, and they've unlocked Sword Art, so he can go around the map and make plays. That could change with bot lane meta changing. I also think we saw something that my friends and I joked about in voice chat as the duality of Bin, and whether Bin is going to be able to, because I think he's actually insanely talented, but whether he's going to be able to have a slightly wider champ pool and be able to go up against other tops. So, I mean, I won't be like, I won't like yell at you for not believing in Suning. They're in a weird position where people are like either overhyping them or underhyping them, I think.
I'm inclined to go G2 Korean team, whichever it will be, Gen.G or T1 if we were to get this group. But I actually think every single person in this group has a shot. I would take G2 number 1 seed, but I think all the other 3 have a shot to make it out at number 2. This is actually a very competitive group. Tuning, Liquid, and whatever Korean team would fall into this. Yeah.
I have a caveat. If it's Gen.G, I think Team Liquid's screwed because Gen.G just plays what Team Liquid does, but they're better. Like, they just have better players at what they do. It's like, oh, hey, guys, who wants to do a 35-minute, 6 items, 80 carry battle? Team Liquid has tactical. Gen.G has ruler. I'm going to probably pick the team of ruler on the team. I think T1 might make it interesting. I do think this Team Liquid team might have... They have a lot... They have a lot of potential to do well just because they have so many veterans. Like, everyone always doubts Impact. Like, old man Impact comes to every world championship, and everyone's like, oh, man, Impact sucks. He's old. He can't do anything. And then he just slaps, Naguri around.
The big thing in this group is that you have a bunch of teams. So G2 won, like, they're out.
Yeah.
The rest of the 3 teams are like whoever makes it from Gen.G or T1. I'll go Gen.G because I think Gen.G are a better team. They all play kind of a slow style. Like I said, Suning are the most standard team that China's sending, right? So that's what makes it really interesting, and that's actually why I think this group would be really bad for TL, because there are 2 other teams that play kind of a similar style to what they want to do, but do it better.
This would, like, essentially, this would be like the G2 hyper aggro playstyle versus like 3 teams that, to Emily's point, all play the same. All play the same, and that is why this group would simultaneously be the most competitive, but also the most resonance.
I'll take Gen.G.
They all play late game.
I'm going Gen.G second. Gen.G second.
Yeah, I'll go Gen.G second in this one too.
Emily?
I'll go Gen.G second, but don't sleep on Suning. I don't think they're bad, guys.
This is a great group draw for Gen.G, by the way. Like, this is like that's like one of the best draws Gen.G could get.
Don't repeat 2018. Don't get a good group draw and then somehow flub it, please. Thank you.
So Group A, JD Gaming and Rogue. Group B, Top Esports and DRX. Group C, G2 and either T1 or Gen.G.
Gen.G.
Well, let's say Gen.G. And
if
that
it's T1,
now,
I might go Suning, yeah.
Tyler, we're going to start with you on Group D.
All right.
And Group D consists of Damwon Gaming, Fnatic, FlyQuest, and LGD.
Oof, I mean, lots of really good team fighting in this group. Lots of good team fighting. Let's just say Naguri is fine, right? Let's just say, like, this is a world where Naguri can practice normally, he can scrim normally. We're getting 100% Naguri. If we're getting 100% Naguri, even though I love Flame, and I think even if Flame does sub in, Damwon is still a very scary team. I think Damwon should be penciled in, probably even penned in number 1 in this group. I just think they're just too dang good. I don't think Fnatic, FlyQuest, or LGD could touch them in terms of either laning or team fighting. I do really like FlyQuest's team fighting, and I do think that a player like Ignar throws, he can kind of disrupt teams with his roaming style, but you also have the best, in my personal opinion, the best roaming sport in the world, Barrel, on Damwon. So it's like, just like how Team Liquid's in the group of Gen.G, where it's like, everything TL does, Gen.G does better. I also think it's very similar to FlyQuest and Damwon, the 2 green teams, where I do think, even though Damwon does play much faster than FlyQuest, I think they both really do love that 5-on-5 team fight. I just think Damwon's just better in that portion, especially when you have a player like Barrel kind of aiding them with roaming support.
What?
I'm gonna make my say. It's Damon and Fly. Do I trust Fnatic? Fnatic?
So here, let me tell you about how FlyQuest lost to TSM. It would be the everyone go at solo play, and Blippo is not going to 1v1 crush him, but I think that Selfmade is going to gank the living hell out of that. This would be the group draw. I think Selfmade camps top like a
it's a group. It's a group of like very strong-willed junglers. I mean,
Emily, jump in here too.
You have Canyon, you have Selfmade, you have Santorin, you have Peanut.
Yeah, I think so. I think Damon's out at number one. If it's like a healthy Damon with Nuguri coming back, I think they're actually like someone that people should be considering for the title. But I want to talk about LGD because you guys are sleeping on this Shea Peanut combination. And similarly, you can also attack top lane in LGD, by the way. But yeah, I think like if there's one thing that LGD's run taught us, it's that if they focus on like a central style that's around Shea's just absolute dominion of mid, that is going to like basically shove in like against a team like Fnatic. That's going to be really tough for them to deal with, I think, because they don't rely on Nemesis for similar control in the mid lane. But yeah, this is an interesting group. I hate betting on LGD though, just as a general rule. I've been burned a lot.
And yeah, I mean, I also like Power of Evil is a solid mid laner, but I do think CA is marginally better. And I don't know. I like
10 seconds.
I say Fnatic.
Hunter wants to say FlyQuest.
Fnatic. I say Fnatic. I say Fnatic. Fnatic will find a way.
I cannot trust Blippo and Nemesis.
Time's
Don't
up.
do this to me.
I say Fnatic is my vote for second. Go to the others.
So Damwon and...
I mean, I feel like I've been outvoted, so I'll go Fnatic, I guess. I think LGD has the potential to surprise people.
No,
so you can say LGD. Jacob, you're the tiebreaker.
Let's do some win trading. I'll take LGD here because I do not trust Nemesis and Blippo.
Okay.
Wait, why do you trust LGD though?
You picked LGD.
But
all right,
hey, my argument against FlyQuest is that literally all like solo is a liability if you focus him, and there are very strong junglers in this entire group across every single team that they would play, and I think the junglers would just camp the living hell out of him because he is the weakest link. So including Peanut, I will choose LGD. Let's go.
You can do the same thing to Longshing, just saying.
Okay, LGD is our pick. Okay, so this is these are the teams that will get out of these groups that we have selected. This has been a lot of fun, by the way. So Group A is JD Gaming and Rogue. JD Gaming and Rogue out of Group A. Out of Group B is TES and DRX. Out of Group C is G2 and Gen.G or T1. And out of Group D is Damwon and LGD Gaming. So that was our hypothetical worlds discussion. What will definitely not be hypothetical is our conversation on Friday right here on Twitch at 3 p.m. Eastern. As long as it takes, we are going to determine a top 20 players going into Worlds. This is us peeling the curtain back and showing you exactly how we get to this process every single year. There's going to be debates, there's going to be arguments, there's going to be fights, people will hate each other, people will rue the day they ever worked with them, people will despise them for the rest of their lives. Based on these conversations on Friday, based on the Church of Chovy, I already see that being a storyline. It's going to be a ton of fun. We're going to be very spirited in our conversations. And the one thing I want to say is that you can already tell from the four of us, I'll even speak for myself here, I am not as knowledgeable as the other three esteemed panelists as it pertains to all the regions in League of Legends. But I still have a fourth of the vote, which means that I, along with my other three colleagues, have to sign off on all the 20 players in our top 20. And that means that I am the best bridge, call it an ARAM if you will, to chat. So I shall be on Friday the voice of the people. If you've ever felt unheard, you join me, us, on Friday, and I will be your champion on Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern.
I need to message Dunk and have him have a TSM contingency roll up in the chat on Friday and lobby Arda the entire time. That is what you're telling me right now.
It's okay. Chovy will end up number 1 as he should be. All right. All will be right in the world. Amen.
Yes, spoken. Emily, any last words on this? What are we looking forward to here?
Good luck getting me to budge on anything.
It's okay. Chovy has moved mountains before. He can move Emily around. Don't worry. God bless Chovy.
I don't like your chances, Tyler. That's all I'm gonna say.
He beat Gen.G. He dragged DRX's carcass to Worlds. He dethroned Gen.G. His next step is defeating Emily Rand on Friday. Let's see what happens.
We shall see. So it's going to be Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. That's the next time you're going to see all 4 of us. Please join us, won't you? In the meantime and in between time, good vibes and acts of kindness, everybody. We will see you on Friday.